It is April 12th, and this is the memory team meeting. Yeah, let me share my screen. We can jump right into the topics here. So the important one, so talking about transitioning the team over to CZ, first and most important one. We'll need to reschedule, well, you all will need to reschedule this meeting since CZ is taking over, so I can get my Zoom time back, because it is likely that the sharding team will be around a similar time. So I put a note in here to reschedule the meeting with CZ. Looks like CZ, you want to verbalize?
Yes, if it's convenient to everyone, I will just schedule the meeting at the same time. Any suggestions?
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, I would say Craig has a very unique personal schedule. So it's easy. If you feel 6 a.m. is too early to be effective, I found myself, if I join a meeting like at 6 a.m., I need to get up like at 5 or 5:30, something like that. So the rest of the day, for me, my personal feeling is about washed. Basically, it's washed. So if you feel you need to be productive for the, this is too early, you feel free to discuss with the team to see if you can push it out for like 30 minutes or 1 hour, something like that. That's my suggestion. But for me, 6 a.m., if I do it every week, it's just for me, the day is tough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Feel free to push it back.
Okay.
For me, it's not a problem at all to push it back.
I will schedule one after the meeting. Maybe we can also discuss on our one. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a strange schedule. I have to get up. I get up before 5 every day because of my kids. So, and I don't know if you noticed, but probably every meeting I'm drinking coffee anyway. So.
Yeah, I guess it may force me to sleep early. So that's may also a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, I'm passed out pretty early. Right? All right, next topic, I put this in here. I had one-on-ones with everyone. We talked about the transition, and there were some concerns about the future of the memory team. So yeah, I won't go in order of the topics here. There is support for the memory team at the highest levels in the company. There's a recognized need for the memory team. I think probably the one that's most interesting for everybody is there is a request to prioritize a backfill for the memory group. Since Camille is officially joining the sharding team, there is a request to hire another person to join the memory team. So it's under review, pending approval. I don't know where it is in that whole process, but there is a request to add one more person to the memory team. So it'll bring us back up to 4. And as soon as we hear something, we'll share it with y'all. But just thought that would help encourage the team to know that there is support to continue the team. And our roadmap supports, I mean, we have a pretty healthy roadmap for things that are defined and for things that are not yet defined, like the work that will come from the sharding group. So the composable code base, the data application layer they're all still work in flight, but for now, our roadmap is healthy enough that we have plenty of work to do for the foreseeable future. So any questions? I've listed out everything that we already have. We don't need to necessarily go through that. Nicola, you do have a question on composable code base.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Like I'm just like not sure like what is. I guess we don't know. I think that Camille covered it with his answer, because once we merge it, like I don't know if this is gonna be part of the database sharding team, because it will require like its logical part, but I don't know. I was just considering like, are we going to continue pursuing this, or it will be handled by a different team, or if we decide to like pursue this path at all in the end.
So I guess like my perception is like you never know until someone starts working on that. Because it's kind of fully like fluid. But I'm kind of like still consider that this is like important aspect, and like composable code base is maybe more important from the perspective of the memory usage and sustainability of that. Because like what Chan and Craig are saying about the data access, I think like composable code base does help that. but it's not really like a strong requirement like to achieve these other goals. So I guess like my perception is like, I just want this to get merged, get like things rolling, and like see where it actually fits to start executing that. There appears to be like the growing need for that, some kind of split. And even like if you like read some maybe Gary, these like considerations about the sharding, these are more like application layer structure. It kind of pop-ups everywhere. Like it seems like that this is kind of right now the most iterative direction for us to proceed. And it kind of like seems like how we perceive how we want to run GitLab also from other groups. And it's unlikely that like it's kind of unlikely that it's gonna change like this perspective. The question is like who is gonna be doing that in the end. So that's probably like the hard question to answer. For me, like the composable code base is more right now about being more memory efficient and resource efficient, and less about the data access. But data access, we also benefit from that proposal if you would be able to execute that. But we can probably for the data access like do everything else to still like to achieve the same goals. So there's like a long backlog for the memory team, truly. So
yeah.
not enough people like to do all of that. That's I guess the biggest issue. Because if you would like remove like prioritize shiftdb from the list, like I would say, let's start doing composable code base. But we actually have 3 major topics right now for the memory team on the agenda. So it makes it slightly harder like to fit all of these things.
Yeah, and I think there's a link to our roadmap above. I'll just show it up here. I spent some time making sure that you showed up on our roadmap. So we finished up, we still have some follow-up items for telemetry, which we don't have accurate dates on. But we still have the all the endpoints for reducing memory consumption in Puma and Sidekick. We have the split application and functional parts. We have a bunch of ideas that we've thrown into the backlog that we haven't had time to address yet, plus all the things that Camille just mentioned that will come out of the sharding group. So there's no shortage of work. And again, jumping all over the place here, Fabian did recommend having a workshop so we can brainstorm and organize these things. So just wanted to convey that the memory team is needed. You all aren't going anywhere, and we're trying to fund the memory team to get another person to backfill Camille jumping over to the sharding group. And Camille's still around.
Can we clone him?
Yeah. Well, he does have that printer in the background.
Nicola, please don't clone me. I will not do it myself.
I mean, the simpler technical solution is not to clone Camille, but to shard his personality into functional units.
Oh, that's brutal.
Sorry, I could not use this.
Everyone feeling punny today.
Okay. I did a few comments there just to verbalize. First of all, the planning spreadsheet, that SSOT, that's always the single source of truth for planning, hackathon planning. And right now, those backfills are top. Did I link to the wrong spreadsheet?
You did. Yeah.
Bummer.
I was also just like, this looks unfamiliar.
I got it, John.
No, I think I get the link. You got it?
Let's see if yep.
Okay, yeah. So right now, this is a top number one request. And what I heard is it's going to be reviewed in the executive meeting this week. So, so that's a week-long exec week meeting. Also about the composable code base, my personal take is it's going to be, we probably are going to pilot it with the data access layer. That's basically data access layer is a part of the database scalability working group. So we could use this concept to do that code. Basically, that's building a layer between the applications and the low-level data details. So that's, I think this is a good example to practice that too. If we're not going to artificially break up something or break up the code, this will be a natural move as an example. So
I would,
and of course,
I would probably add like one comment to the composable code base, like the general idea. Like if we start doing that, we need to actually like get to this pretty much, let's say, completion, because like I think like it's pretty structural change, and in any model, if we do something that like we finish in 50%, we leave things in the worst state than they were. So the composable code base, like we need to actually know that this is the right time and that we can actually allocate enough time to go through all of these iterations, to not start something and finish early and kind of leave things in the worst state that they were. And this is probably like the biggest challenge, like with the composable code base and all of these changes, like what iterations to do to make them, let's say, to some extent complete and self-sufficient, that they are always like moving us into like the better code base, not kind of leaving things unfinished if we have to change our topics. So I'm kind of thinking that this is really like the prerequisite before we can start doing composable code base, to know that we can allocate enough time that it's at any point it's finished, to the point that like we can move on to other topics if it's really needed.
Yeah. And I also just mentioned that the database, data access layer, so that is part of this working group. And I can imagine almost everybody in this team, memory team, will be involved there once we have the blueprints and we're ready to implement. So that I don't know if it's talked in the past already in this team, but that database scalability working group will go along two major streams. One is, of course, clearly that's sharding. The first one is sharding. That's clear. The other path to go through is to see how we can scale the database vertically. I'm using vertically, probably not accurate, but still it's basically looking at the data usage patterns, and from those patterns to see how we can scale the database based on the data usage patterns. And also this data access layer is a new concept there introduced by Jerry, that this is very much like SOA architecture, that you have the application on top, you have all the data and low-level details at the bottom, but you build a business layer, business logic layer in the middle, so that you abstract all the data details. The application developers don't have to worry about how to interact with the raw data. They just call API and the data is returned to them. So this data access layer is a business logic layer.
Yeah, so I would like to add a couple of thoughts from my end as well. So I'm actually very happy that we're done with the 2 GB initiative, that we shipped the first iteration. And now I think we have a few sort of more things on the sort of short-term, medium-term roadmap. But I do actually think our problem in memory will be more to prioritize what we consider to be the most valuable things to do. I don't think we are going to have a shortage of interesting things to work on. Right? There's so much stuff that needs doing, right? That I think our task will be to decide and be very ruthless in where we want to spend our time and how we do that and how we can provide the most value. And I think what is actually also exciting is to think about the impact that we have on GitLab, right? Directly, the GitLab developers, but then also, how the changes that you make translate into customer value, right? And I think at the moment, this is mostly by efficiency improvements. But I think in the long term, we also have very interesting, I think, opportunities to take some of the tooling and some of the things that we're building for GitLab and thinking about how others can actually benefit from that. So I think that will take a long time, right, to actually get to this point. But I think that's important to keep in mind that, the folks that are like, we are using GitLab and we're solving our own issues with our own development lifecycle. And I think it is very likely that many other companies who are using GitLab will face similar problems. And if we can make their lives easier, through the things that we develop, I think that's going to be a huge benefit, because we know that these problems are real because we're facing them, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity there. And then kind of along those lines, I think one thing that we all also need to remember, which I think is especially important for, well, it's actually important for everyone, but I think it's most apparent in sections like memory, right, or database. Adding new things and new features, right, and new stuff is not necessarily the most efficient solution to solving problems, nor is it necessarily the most valuable one. And there's a great publication in Nature this week, which I encourage you to read, at least the sort of high level, that we know there is research indicating that people tend to solve problems by adding new things, right? But sometimes removing things is actually the more efficient solution, right? And making things better in that way. And I think the memory team specifically is in a great position to actually identify those kinds of opportunities and making things simpler, right? Making them easier, and thereby actually producing a lot of value, right? Rather than adding more stuff on top of all of the other stuff that we have already. So I'm quite excited about it because, that's, I think, actually something that we underestimate sometimes, the impact these types of changes can have. So yeah, and so I think like my proposal is also, given that we have maybe the ability here to, think a little bit into the future, right? And there are some changes, and this is an opportunity also to think a little bit about, okay, what, composable code base is one of those things. It's very large, right? But there may be other things that we want to consider also to get your input and say like, hey, what about in a year, right? Like, where do we actually want to go? Where do we want to take it? Because we have buy-in, right? We have support. We'll get people working on it. So we can shape our own path a little bit as well, right? And I think that's quite exciting. I think given the position of the team, right, and where we are right now, I think it is really up to us to define, and say, hey, this is our vision of all of this. This is where we want to end up at some point. I think that's quite exciting.
Thank you, Fabian. So while you were talking about that, it made me think, and I posted this to the memory channel, but we now have this report to the mechanical, oh man, what's the name of the channel? Mech Simp Alerts. This channel contains alerts of badly performing endpoints in production. So we now have the Rails memory usage per endpoint warning. We do need to communicate that out more widely for folks that haven't seen it, so they know that their endpoint is troublesome. I know we've talked about it in our channel, but what's the next step for this? If there's already an issue out there, I apologize for asking this question, but we have it in our mechanical sympathy alerts Slack channel, but how do we bring this back to the product so people know about their troublesome endpoints, to Fabian's point?
I can speak to this a little bit. I think we had that discussion a couple of weeks back with Alexei. I think the longer term path here internally would be, we need to define ideally some patterns of what we've actually observed problems are with these endpoints to give people a starting point on how to address them. But I think once we have a way of alerting people to this, I think a common sort of flow that we see, let's say, being moderately successful is to open up issues for this, right? And say like, hey, this is your endpoint, it allocates too much resources, whatever that means, right? I think that needs to be defined as well. Then apply, for example, the infra dev label and push it into the triage reports for the individual product groups so that they see that this is a thing that's happening for them. And if we can give them the tools to resolve it, then we all of a sudden fan out these issues to other groups. I'm not sure, like I personally would say we should do that once we have a good understanding of how to resolve many of those things, right? Like maybe we'll never know everything, right? But at least to help people sort of maybe help themselves a little bit more. Because I think this is a concern that I have, is there's probably going to be so many of them that we'll end up spending 4 people full-time fixing this stuff, and it's much more efficient to have other people fix their own issues, right? And then apply sort of, like guidelines, frameworks, whatever may be most appropriate. That's sort of my thought.
I have another thought, because like we definitely have to fix all the existing stuff at some point. But what we could do to ensure that all the new stuff has much higher requirements for the memory usage. I mean, where if you add a new endpoint, it's validated for the memory usage. If it's going outside the memory usage of the given boundary, your teammates get alerted for you to improve that. It's kind of like, I'm kind of anticipating that if someone is already doing that, it's gonna be much easier for them to fix that his endpoint why he was introduced recently. So I'm kind of like thinking, Fabian, that maybe to extend like your thought is maybe we should start enforcing this for all the new stuff that is happening.
Yep.
And then kind of work with people on this new stuff, because there is not so much new stuff, new endpoints being added each release versus things that are extended on existing ones. But maybe this could be like a good hint to ensure that we don't make things worse significantly.
I like that. I like that thought. I think it's also, I mean, in the long term, right? If we even prevent people from adding new things, if they don't adhere to these guarantees, right? Something that's true for database as well. That may be more preemptive than corrective, right? It's a good idea.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Camille. I was thinking something similar and clearly didn't word it properly. So we have the reactive epic, right? We now have the way to measure the endpoints, and we've identified the top offending endpoints with this epic. But how do we bring those warnings back closer to the product to do the preemptive things like Camille was talking about? If you're adding a new endpoint, you get an immediate report back saying, hey, this is violating our terms of service for amount of memory used, or for existing endpoints once they trip over. Is there a way we can bring that into the product rather than having it pump out to a Slack channel, say, hey, you broke this thing over here, right?
Yeah, I don't know right now, right? I don't think we need to solve it now either, but yep. I know that the same problem is sort of apparent for database migrations, right? And these kinds of things where you don't want to have people go to staging, right, and manually verify that things are fine, only to see them break in production, right? So yep. The problem space is kind of similar. And I think for Postgres world, it's the making it easier to access production like data. I have no idea how that would look for sort of these memory intensive endpoints, because I don't know how well these things scale, right? It's like if it is predictable, that if it allocates X amount per call, right, that on a, at scale in GitLab.com, it will be very large, right? You don't need all of the data there to know that, right? But I don't know if that is true. But it would be great if we had a way in CI, for example, to like run this, right? And basically say, yep, no, this is not passing our memory budget. We're not even letting you deploy this, right? Eventually, right? Or at least warn people. But I think this is something for the engineering folks.
I kind of have like additional 2 or 3 different ideas about that one. Like one idea is like, I know that like engineering managers receive like some kind of weekly or monthly reports. Maybe for these reports, maybe we could like sneak in a single endpoint for the given feature category that's using like the most resources to kind of raise awareness, like a single one. We know that some of these things just use significantly more than others, which would be like one idea. Second idea, like ELK actually could allow us to see a moving average. For example, we see that in the last week, this endpoint used 50% or like 100% more resource usage. I mean, it used on 99th percentile 100% more, or a new endpoint appeared to be significantly over a boundary. And it's to some extent similar to these sympathy alerts, because it would still be like a very similar kind of query, like to see about the trend, like compare like the list from the same day of the last week versus like day before, and compare like the memory usage. If it's like significantly worse by a magnitude, then we need to raise alerts. Or if it's something new that is like escaping that was not present like in the last week, also kind of raise alerts. There's like one potential problem, of course, with the ELK only having 7-day window, but maybe there are some ways to work around that problem. But I'm kind of thinking that if we could somehow write ELK query in a similar way as max sympathy alerts, it would find a change in the percentage. It could kind of be like a good data to be pushed like to the relevant team if you would have some kind of mapping.
Awesome. All right. All good talks for future work of the memory team. So hopefully everybody's confident that there's support for the memory team and continuing the memory team. So if they're, I'll continue one-on-ones through this week. If anybody has any concerns, please feel free to reach out to me or Chan or CZ. We're all here to talk and answer any questions you may have. That being said, let's switch over to current work. Jump into the build board. What closed this week? Nicola, first one. This is awesome.
Yes, actually, this is closed, but it's deployed only on staging because on production, it's not yet enabled. But we have a separate issue that is tracking, like enabling the environment variable. And then actually, even if when we enable the environment variable on production, we will still need to roll out the feature flag for this. So currently I'm monitoring the like status and work on staging, but in order to see the real effects, this will need to land on production. And this is still not the case. I'm currently working on 2 different issues like that are introducing an additional Prometheus metrics so we can like monitor this closely. But yes, this is
I'm assuming
closed.
all these are related.
Yes, that's true.
Awesome.
But it works. This is important. So congrats, Nicola.
Yeah, this is huge. Thank you. All right, Matthias, you get the next 2.
Just a second. This is going to also affect self-managed customers who have more than one database replica, correct?
It will, but for now, we don't have any workers that is like exploiting this. So for now, we're fine. Like it will not be.
Okay, no, I'm just wondering, it's like when all of this is rolled out and validated and working, right, then we may want to announce that actually as something that is useful for self-hosted customers in a release post, but only if there's any impact, that actually benefits from.
Yeah, I believe so. Camille, correct me if I'm wrong. Like that, they will need probably to configure the load balancing for the Sidekick as well in their configuration. But yeah, we will probably need to cover that. additionally?
I think in general people, it will be like self-enable for them. I'm unsure about the cloud native, because for the cloud native, I think we enabled it to some extent explicitly, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's only about the different configuration for our infrastructure. So Fabian, I think in general, like it will work out of the box for our customers. There is one small potential risk about amount of the database connection, because side key talking to replicas would slightly change the execution profile on the database. It will move more onto replicas than on the primary. I think at any rate, it needs to be announced on the release post when it's go default on.
No, that's
because it has like the in general positive performance impact, but in some cases it might need some fine tuning if some of our customers, for example, limit amount of the connections to the replicas. I know that like one of the concerns that we had on the GitLab.com and staging was like, and this is why we kind of did go a long way around rolling this out via environment variable. It's like you now start to have many side keys opening a lot of additional connections to replicas, and we were unsure like how our production infrastructure gonna behave on that. This is why we are doing this kind of very slow rollout when we enable that feature on the side key pretty selectively. I don't think that is gonna be big of the concern on the customer side, but giving them heads up, I think it's very important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's talk about it when the time is there. But I think if it has the benefit of improving performance, right, and maybe there are some risks, we should document the risks, and we should also let people know so that they're aware of this.
Yeah, that issue, it was one of the very long-winded ones that came out of the rapid action. I think in total we sent probably 5 MRs or so to make improvements, and especially like the last change we made was quite impactful for a bigger customer who had seen like pretty long latencies on this endpoint, and we just said like let's just call it done at this point, because there's like more stuff we could have done, but it was like stretching it a bit. So I think we made good progress there, so we decided to close it. And the next one is related to, there was just a rollout of a new service we introduced. Maybe I can quickly talk about that as well. That's the last issue that's in review here. You can move that actually over to close because we merged that today. Yeah, the one at the bottom. Yeah, so what happened there was also part of the rapid action. So we introduced a new service object that batch aborts pipelines in the response to users getting blocked, because that's faster. And we were aware that there are problems with this because it skipped a bunch of post-commit hooks. And we said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because yeah, we had to act on it because the abuse team was basically blocked on this. Yeah, and one problem I fixed with this was that we had to put pipelines in the correct state. Instead of canceling, they should be failed with like a message. So there was some work to be done there, so that landed today. And there was a bug as well, which actually caused like a runaway memory issue in production that actually caused an incident. But those are both fixed now. So I think we can finally call it done.
Cool, thank you. All right, Nicola,
as I already mentioned, like before we like deploy these changes on production, we would like to have those additional Prometheus metrics that will give us a hint like what's going on. Did we like retry the sidekick job waiting for replica, or we like fall back to the primary because replica was not ready and there was a big replication lag or something. And we also want to like count the numbers of time. How many times did we like check for replication lag, because we can schedule a lot of jobs in a batch. So we want to see like how big impact will this querying this replication log how expensive it's gonna be for the sidekick jobs. So we want to have all those information before we like enable it on production. So those two issues are currently in maintenance review. I'm addressing some Camille's comments, but I guess first one is already ready, and I'm still addressing some hints from Camille on the second one. And then I will probably switch on adding this documentation. This issue is not assigned to me yet, but I guess that.
So it's unblocked at this point in time.
Well, yeah, I think it's ready. We still need to enable it in production. I'm not sure like how it goes when we like merge those documentation things, but I think that I can start working on it as soon as I add those metrics.
All yours.
Yeah. And there is this follow-up issue where we want to address some additional things, like we want to pass the replication log from the replica as well, because it can happen that replica is a little bit like that we access the replica on the web application and then the sidekick job uses different replicas. So we want to make sure that those two replicas are also in sync. And there is also some discussion about improving the retrying mechanism when we retry a sidekick job, if in case that replica is not ready. So there are some 2 or 3 things mentioned in the discussion that needs to be addressed. So this is some follow-up work after all of this is done. So I'm currently not working on this because I'm addressing these changes, and I will probably start documentation as well, but I'm planning to continue working on this as well. So I'm not sure, like, should we move it in ready for development or paused or somewhere else, but.
We'll just leave it for now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Alexei.
Yeah, this is one of these issues from our new epic. One of the most used issues, which is significant offender in terms of memory. And I feel like I'm making a good progress here. I'm also documenting all my findings in a short summary in the issue. And after gathering a few of those summaries, I plan to trim them a bit, maybe to leave only significant steps. And good thing that it's reproducible. And I'm currently trying to see if I could make some change without involving the product team, just kind of rather blindly find a good solution for that. Yeah.
Matthias, you got the last one.
Yeah, that's coming out of the same list. It's, yeah, like one of these endpoints. It's actually showing up in the Maxim sim alerts. I just noticed. Haven't made a ton of progress with this. I'm basically, I know it's just finished. I'm basically importing the GPT project locally because it has a lot of data, a lot of commits. So I hope I just like need to prior to this, I need like a lot of commit data, like either across a lot of files or very like large commits to actually measure what's taking so much time here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm still kind of prepping this, but I hope to make more progress with this week.
Cool, thank you. All right, that's it for work in flight. Camille did ask this question below. Is it on the memory team or on distribution team for dropping Unicorn prior to 4.14.0? Camille, you might have more expertise than the rest of us on this one.
It's just a question. I know that like the 14.0 got like moved by 1 milestone. So it's like the question like who is gonna be handling that, because I assume that, I don't know, it should be probably milestone should be changed to the 14.0 because milestone like this is wrong.
Well, I think that maybe I'm wrong here, but I think there are 2 things, right? The one is we have already announced several times that you will need to use Puma in order to be able to upgrade to 14.0, right? So in 14.0, we can remove any code that references Unicorn. I don't know, right, if we need to provide any guardrails to people with regards to this. So if they're still using Unicorn and they're attempting to upgrade to 14.0, should we block that upgrade, right? This is something that we will do with, for example, hashed storage, or we actually already do that. Right? It's like they need to have migrated beforehand in order to be able to actually upgrade to that release. This is a lack of my knowledge. I don't know if that's even needed, right? If this is essentially a no op, right? And we don't need to do anything, then I think the question is just, we need to remove all of the Unicorn related code, or need to, right? I guess it's fun to remove code on some level.
But outside of
14.0.
Outside of the what's, like, and I mean, I think like the question was just like as well, if it's definitely sitting with our team or a different team, because I don't expect it to be like super difficult to do or anything. It just sounds like it's probably one of these epics that there's a lot of legwork to do, you know, that might drag on for a while, and might be a distraction for maybe not a super short amount of time. Because there's like so many parts that need to be cleaned up.
Yeah, so I guess like the tricky part about that, it's like it's removal in the race, it's removal in Omnibus, probably CMG, and Omnibus and CMG and race, each of them to some extent has some Unicorn specific configuration. And it's also like going back to Fabian's question, like how we should handle people using this configuration. Should we kind of in background migrating them to use Puma? Because someone can have Unicorn enable set to true, where it explicitly enables only Unicorn, or like set to false, which may seem that Unicorn is explicitly disabled. And now we forcefully switch them to Puma, and we may start running Puma on their installation. So I guess like my perception really about that, it's probably better suited with the distribution, but maybe some of our help may be needed to prepare a MAR that would effectively remove like the gem on the Rails side. But all of these policies about the handling configuration and clean up all other products would likely be better with the distribution, because they have probably some way of handling this configuration changes and removal of them in these edge cases. So that's why my question is really about, because it's actually like this consists of multiple parts where only memory team currently what we do can probably do only this very first part of the race. We could of course do all other stuff, but the question is whether we should.
The answer is of course no, right? If we can get another team to do it. So my offer, like I think how this is likely going to go is, if we I think I need a little bit more time and maybe to understand what we want to do. If we can offer doing the first part, you know, like maybe the configuration change, right, or you know, that kind of thing, right, where we know, like we want to prevent people from breaking their upgrade, right? And I think that's fair, right? But I think I can speak to the distribution PM and ask if they can take the removal on, especially if it touches so many different parts, because they know how to do that. I think if they do it all the time, and from past experience, I think this can be a little bit involved just because it has so many moving parts.
I felt what Fabian said makes sense. I felt we might want to scope out all the works so that even we pass to the other teams, we'll let them know, hey, here's the changes that we need to make.
There is also this very important aspect about ordering of the things. Like we cannot remove that gem from the race until all references in Omnibus and CNG are removed, because then Omnibus and CNG would fail. So I think like if I look at this issue from the memory perspective, it's effectively blocked until we remove from the Omnibus.
We'll figure it out. But it's good to call it out, because if we don't, we'll violate our own policy. So
another question regarding this: should we move the milestone to 13.12? Just in case.
If it's set that already, it's not refreshed.
Does it need to be in 13.12 though? Or does it need to be part of 14?
So the thing is that if we need to, like, this is again, you know, it may be wrong, but I know that we the Geo team, we have to do some work to be released in 13.12, so that when you upgrade a 13.12 installation, you're attempting to upgrade to 14.0, it will not work if you have, for example, hashed storage, right? So it needs to be in a release before 14.0, right? Because you want to essentially say, no, you can't do this, right?
We consider consecutive upgrades. I mean, some people could just jump from 13.10 to straight to 14.0, right? Or
No.
is it going through all the upgrades all the time?
So we usually recommend that people always upgrade to the last minor release before the major release.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting.
Who should I just assign this to you, Fabian, for now? So it sounds like there's some
assign
work
it to me. I'll figure it out.
All right.
Fabian, I posted a comment about like the things to consider in this removal of the bottom.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
All right. And we are.
I'm starting to become an expert in all the different ways we can upgrade GitLab and the guarantees we give or give not. You know, it's actually much more involved than I thought it would be.
All right, we are at the end of the agenda and nearing the end of the time of the meeting. So any other topics folks want to cover today? Nope. All right, thanks everybody. Happy Monday.
Happy
See you all
Monday.
online.
Happy Monday.